Jesus began many of his teachings with these words, "The kingdom of heaven is like." Often he continued with a parable. Again, what is a parable? A parable is a story of comparison. It's an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. Tonight on this Good Friday, I'd like to share with you a modern day story or parable. It's called the parable of the two portraits. The story goes like this. A world-famous artist sat down to have his own portrait drawn. The first portrait was drawn by his granddaughter. "Be still, Grandpa," she said. "I'm going to draw you a beautiful portrait." She smiled from ear to ear. "Grandpa, you will love it, I'm sure." She measured her grandfather's features and dimensions like she was an expert. "Hold still," she said, "don't move." She grabbed her crayons and drew what she saw in her grandfather. "Almost done," she said. And she grew more and more excited at each passing minute. She finally held it up and said, "Here it is. It looks just like you." "I absolutely love it. It is wonderful," the grandfather said. In reality, the picture was a stick figure. Nothing was proportional, nothing was symmetrical. It was hard to tell even the eyes from the ears. You had to look very hard to see where the nose started and where the mouth ended. Crayon was smudged all over the page. It was in reality a mess. The grandfather, this world-renowned artist, he took the portrait and he hugged it against his chest and against his heart. His heart was filled with love. "Young lady," he said, "this is a masterpiece." The grandfather was delighted. "Young lady, there is something wrong with the picture," the grandfather jibed. "You didn't sign it. Every artist signs his or her work." But the young girl, she didn't sign the portrait with her name. She took one of the crayons and she scribbled, "I love you, grandfather." She gave her grandpa this portrait and gave him the biggest hug you have ever seen. You never think that such a sweet little girl could hug someone so tight. And she gave him a sweet kiss. A tear rolled down the cheek of this legendary artist, and he looked again at the portrait, and his voice cracked. "I'm going to hang this on the wall, and I will treasure it forever." The second portrait of this well-renowned artist, well, it was done by another artist. It was done by a young artist who was up and coming. He was celebrated, even at such a young age. He was so sure of himself, proud, haughty. He was gifted beyond belief, but he was not only full of talent, he was also full of himself. "Before I begin, I want you to know something," he said. "I'm not going to paint this portrait of you for free. In fact, I expect something of you. In fact, you will be ready to pay the highest of prices once you see my masterpiece. I'm worth every penny. I will capture your image and your likeness unlike any other." Well, when the portrait was finished, sure enough, every stroke of the brush was perfect. The young man was more than satisfied in his own labor. "I, by my own great skill, have portrayed your very essence for all the ages." And the old man looked at the portrait, and indeed, every nuance was captured. But the old man wasn't moved by the painting. The old man saw that the portrait wasn't signed. "I see that you forgot to sign your work." You know, every artist signs his or her own work. The young artist, filled with vanity, he signed the painting. He signed his name so large that when one looked at the portrait, the very first thing their eye was drawn to wasn't the portrait, but the signature. One day, the young man said, "People will look at this painting and think more about me than you." The old man became so furious that he told this young artist, "Depart from me. I never want to see you again. Leave this house and go out into the darkness of the night." The old man picked up the portrait. He held it in his hands. The portrait, as good as it was, it did not impress. The old man tossed it into a bin of garbage. He had a tear of sadness in his eye, his heart heavy with sorrow. So what is the tale of the two portraits? Two different relationships. One was drawn out of love and affection. One was drawn out of pride for reward. So it is with us. So it is with you. Our Lord is not impressed by our attempts at love. We are not drawing any masterpieces by our own works. Our works motivated by self-love are nothing but rubbish. But for those who come to him in love, even if your life is far from a masterpiece, he holds you close to his heart. He holds you close to his chest. And he says, "I love you. I delight in you. I am pleased to have you as my child." 1 John 3, verse 1. "Behold what manner of love the Father has given to us, that we should be called the children of God. And such we are. Amen."